Monday, and it's freezing 16 degrees when I woke up today. Smidge warmer than yesterday. And I did walk the dogs. I said, I cannot deny them another walk. Tootsie will probably bite me. So we didn't go far because it was really cold. I had my hooded scarf on and my parka, and I was so cold. So welcome back to Crafting Crime Daily, the show where I recap live trials that are going on the internet. And the two that we're talking about this week are going to be the retrial of Mark Jensen, which is wrapping up. They have promised us, the defense has promised us, today they will be done. Assuming that the prosecution does not spend all day long cross-examining, which got a chuckle out of the jury on Friday. So, and then Tuesday, there may be one or two rebuttal witnesses for the state, and then maybe closing arguments Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday morning. That is on the retrial of Mark Jensen. And then, of course, we're going to be focusing, as is everybody else in the true crime community, on the Alex Murdaugh case. A lot to talk about regarding what happened last week and what questions we still have. So, what needs to be answered? In my mind, as a juror, what would I be thinking? So we're going to talk about that stuff. And of course, we're going to go through my true crime calendar. Yep. I am diamond painting. Yesterday I just kept spilling drills. It's crazy. They were all over. I'd get them all organized in the tray in nice little lines, and I'd set the tray down, and then somehow I would bump it, and the drills would go everywhere. I needed a deep kitchen mixing bowl for my drills so I don't bump it and they go. Yeah, that's the kind of drill tray I need. Mixing bowl side with 10-inch walls on. Yeah. Anyway, got my coffee. So I got up, took the dogs for a walk. Already been Tootsie, want to go for a car ride? I don't want to say it too loud because she'll think we're going again. So we went to the car ride. We went and got my prescription, went to McDonald's, got me some hot cakes. Oh my God, those were so good. I don't do that very often. In fact, it's been years. Usually I just make my own pancakes. Less mess, right? Yeah. Oh, that coffee's so good. Look at my gnome. Have you guys seen my gnome? The lighting is really weird today. Yep, there's a pink gnome there. It's very gray outside. Very, very gray. So I'm going to sit and diamond paint. I would say we're at the end of January, and I have roughly 50% of this painting done. Maybe a smidge more than 50%, but I'm going to keep plugging along for the month of February, and then March 1st we will start our mystery diamond painting. Tootsie wants back in the house. One moment, please. I forgot she was out there. Poor thing. Okay, give the lighting a chance to adjust. I do not know what's going on with the lighting today. It's gray outside, so that's where we are at with the diamond painting. So yeah, March 1st we'll start the mystery diamond painting, and then I don't know what it's something. My painting will have something to do with fantasy. So that's all I have to say about that. Okay, let's dive right into it. Mark Jensen. I thought it would be wrapped up by now, but the defense has put on several expert witnesses, which I gotta say, they're swinging for the fences on this one. They are really going for this not guilty verdict. Still not buying it. still not buying it. So they put on a forensic pathologist. Now they've done a forensic toxicologist, a forensic pathologist, and I saw that this morning they were putting on a forensic psychiatrist. Okay. Well, the forensic pathologist kind of agreed with everybody else in this case. I think there is just no doubt we can put this to rest that she died. The cause of her death was ethylene glycol poisoning. Now, here's where nobody agrees. Did it have anything to do with Mark Jensen sitting on her and asphyxiating her? The defense experts are all saying, no, it did not. That you cannot conclusively say that. They're saying that there's as much evidence that this could have been suicide as there is that it could have been homicide. That you can't definitively say one way or the other, so the cause of death should have been undetermined. Because was it suicide? Was it homicide? At this point, my brain is so confused, I'm starting to think, could she really have done it? Could she have set her husband up for this? Well, let's talk about that for a second. We know that he went to this conference and was bragging about, first of all, we know he was having an affair. We know he goes to this conference. Everybody knows he's having an affair because it's with someone at the office, the stockbroker's office. And there were no secrets, apparently. Everybody knows he's having this affair. And he tells this guy that he's looking up ways to kill his wife. And one of those ways is ethylene glycol poisoning that crystallizes you from the inside out. This is pretty damning evidence. I don't know how he's going to get over that. But the question is, did his wife find out about the affair? Did she know about it? She certainly suspected that he was trying to poison her. She told several people. We're not going to, we don't get to see the letter that she wrote to the police. We don't get to see the phone calls or hear the phone calls and voicemails that she left for the police saying, I think he's trying to kill me. But we've heard from several people that she expressed to them, hey, I think Mark's trying to kill me. And one of them was a woman who took the stand on Friday, Mark Jensen's sister. She actually said, hey, well, let's start from the beginning. She gets on the stand and she asks the judge, we'll go way back to the beginning. When the defense calls her as a witness, they tell the judge she doesn't want her face shown on camera. And the judge says, I'm not going to allow that. No, everybody's being shown. That's just the way it is. He says, I shouldn't have allowed the one guy not to be shown, but I did, and I wish I hadn't. So he says, no, she's going to be shown. So she comes up, and nice looking woman. I don't know why she didn't want to be shown, but she didn't want to. Probably didn't want the publicity. So she claims to be, oh, Julie was my best friend. Now, this is Mark's sister. She was my best friend. I was her maid of honor at her wedding. Now, before Julie started dating her brother Mark, she didn't know Julie. It was after they started dating and Julie was hanging around with the family that she became best friends with Julie Jensen. And she testified that at the wedding rehearsal dinner, Julie's mother had a seizure. And then there was a lot of contention about whether what Julie said about that seizure was hearsay. Is it hearsay? Is it not hearsay? The jury has to leave. We hear argument. It's hearsay. But part of it comes in. Part of what she had to say was that it was alcohol related, that her mother was withdrawing from alcohol. I don't know. They were trying to imply that, that someone previously had testified that there was no mental illness in the family, and here we have mom struggling with alcoholism. Okay, is that a mental illness? It's a disease or defect. I don't know if it's a mental disease or defect, or is it a physical, or is it both? I don't know. I don't consider it a mental disease or defect. When I think of mental disease or defect, I think of depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, those kind of things. Alcoholism is something that has to be physically treated. But I don't know. Well, they all have to be physically treated. Okay, we're going down a rabbit hole. Never mind. Okay. So she and Julie, I was very confused about this whole she's my best friend thing. Because at one point, she asked about something about Julie, and she goes, I don't know, they had their friends, they had their own set of friends. And I'm thinking, but you're her best friend. You should know this. But, anyway, so fast forward, Julie has her baby, and then this woman has a baby, and Julie ends up watching both of them while the sister goes to work. Julie is the babysitter. And Julie calls her one day and says, your son just smeared feces all over the wall and you need to come get him. And she was very upset. So she immediately calls Mark, and Mark rushes home, and she goes over to the house, and she says, it never happened. She says, oh, nobody knew what Julie was talking about. It just didn't happen. And the prosecution pointed out, well, are you sure? Julie loved to keep an impeccable home, didn't she? And oh yes, she loved to clean house. And don't you think she cleaned it up before you got there? No, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. So, but for the event that didn't happen, this woman decides she's going to write a letter to her employer asking for a leave of absence because she is having childcare issues, because she doesn't want Julie to watch her child anymore, because she's thinking, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs here. Anyway, so she starts watching her own child after that. She says there was a time when Julie confided in her and she showed her a syringe. She goes, it's one of those small plastic syringes that you might have around your house to give the dog medicine or give a baby medicine, just one of those small syringes, no needle, just a syringe. And she showed it to me, and then she showed me a picture she had taken from out of Mark's day planner, and it showed a list of things. And she said, you don't get it, do you? You don't get it, do you? And she's like, no, I don't get it. She's like, Mark's trying to kill me. He's planning to kill me. And she's like, if you really believe that you are in danger, you need to leave him. You can come to my house. You can go somewhere else. You can, there's plenty of places you can go. Come, but you need to leave. She didn't leave. She was asking about the funeral. What was Mark's demeanor at the funeral? She said he was crying. He was very upset that, he, following this, Julie's passing, it was quite an adjustment for him because, he hadn't run a household before. Now he's got to do the grocery shopping, make sure the kids are getting to school and they've got their lunch. This is not his bailiwick, he's not had to do this before. And now he's got a whole household to run. So he was a little thrown off by that. Then she talked about how Julie loved to manage her money. She spent her money very carefully, and she would account for where it was spent. And she did all that by using the Quicken program on her computer. But she had never seen it. She'd never seen the Quicken program on the computer. Now, we already know that the Quicken program was not used for household finances. It was used by Mark to keep track of his clients, but not Julie. There was no evidence of that. And if she was doing it on a different computer, nobody ever found another computer. They just had this one computer. This was 1998 when this happened, and most households only had one computer. You had a family computer. I'm trying to remember, 1998. Yeah, we had one computer in the house. My husband never used it. I don't think he knew how to turn it on. But he didn't use it. I used it. I did AOL and I did, all that good stuff. But he never used it. So anyway, what else? Okay, that's it. Yeah, so like I said, this morning on the stand is the forensic psychiatrist. I'm interested to see what she has to say. Okay, I'm going to put up a poll. Guilty, not guilty, or, now here's the rub. What if we got a hung jury on this? If the jury is unable to decide, and that could happen, I think the defense has put enough witnesses, expert witnesses on that are saying that the cause of death was or the manner of death was undetermined. They can't tell if it's a homicide, they can't tell if it's a suicide. What if the same goes for the jury? They can't make a decision. Is it homicide? Is it suicide? And they end up hung. Then the judge would have to declare a mistrial, and the state would have to try this case again, a third time, in 25 years. That's insane. Okay, I don't know if that's going to happen, but it could. It could. Would they try this case again? I don't know. All right, so let's talk about the Alex Murdaugh case. Alex Murdaugh. All right, so last week we had the jury selection. They took 700 members of the community, and I want you to say they called a lot more people for jury duty, probably about 1,000 or more, and only 700 showed up. So 700 people showed up, and out of that 700, over Monday and Tuesday, they whittled it down to 18. We got 12 jurors, 6 alternates. And every time they would bring up a panel of jurors, they would bring them up in groups of 122, I think. And the judge would have to read them the witness list to see if, they're related or they have any knowledge of any of the witnesses. There's 255 witnesses between the state and the defense. So every time they would bring a panel, the judge would have to read this long list of. Okay, so that happened. Then we get the opening statements, which I've talked about. Then we have first responders. We had 2 deputies from Colleton County. We had the fire rescue chief. The significant thing about the testimony of the fire rescue chief was that he was asked about those tire tracks. Now, one of the first responding officers, the sergeant, the one that was in charge of the scene until someone else, he was the first officer there, and then he was in charge of the scene until someone more senior got there. And I'll tell you what someone more senior had to say. He saw tire tracks going in different directions. Nobody set aside these tire tracks, but the fire chief also saw these tire tracks, and he pointed them out. And the defense attorney was like, "Did you tell them that they needed to preserve that for?" He goes, "I don't tell them what to do. I just showed them where there's tire tracks." Now, keep in mind, it's pitch black out there. There's no lights, street lights. This is in the middle of nowhere. It was dark. So later on, you get the Colleton County. He was lieutenant, or I don't know. He was the big guy, and he testified that they decided that they weren't going to be the lead They weren't going to take the investigation on this, that they were going to hand it over to the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division because of the conflict of interest. They all knew who Alex Murdaugh was. They all knew about the boat crash, and they just like, no. Now, if you're wondering, what boat crash? Well, a few years before these murders, there was a boating incident. I will see if I can find that episode where I covered it, and I'll put it in the eye here so you can watch that. But long story short, Paul was driving the boat full of teenagers. They're intoxicated. He hits a bridge. One of the people in the boat, Mallory Beach, is ejected from the boat, and she is not found for like a week. And of course, she was deceased. She drowned. So there's Paul was arrested for he wasn't arrested. He was charged. He never got arrested. Like they he turned himself in is what happened. And he was charged. His mugshot, he has regular clothes on, and it's out in the hallway at the courthouse. Because these are the Murdaughs. They don't get arrested. So he was charged with driving this boat while intoxicated, and it resulted in the death of a passenger. And he's also was being sued by the Beach family for the death of Mallory Beach, wrongful death of Mallory Beach, as was Alex Murdaugh and Buster Murdaugh, because Buster, his older brother, loaned him as his ID so he could get liquor that night. Anyway, like I said, that was a really long story. But anyway, the police, they were all familiar with this boat crash. So they said, we're going to let South Carolina Law Enforcement Division take over this. So they were sending this female officer out to be the lead investigator. She says, he said, I want you to, before you get out here, I want you to stop and get a warrant to search the property. And then I want you to come out here. I want you to be the liaison between Colleton County Sheriff's Office and the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, which I'm going to call SLED from here on out. So when you hear me talk about SLED, that's what I'm talking about. So SLED responds out there. Well, before SLED can get there, this lead guy, he gets notified that there's a storm headed in. And it's about 45 minutes out. So he's got officers running around, getting tents. They secure a tent to put over Maggie's body. They said Paul's body was partially covered because he was sort of like half in the feed house, half out of the feed house. So, and then they tried to do as much processing of the crime scene that they could before this storm came through. So, but anyway, it comes through. The tire tracks are then gone. No more tire tracks because the storm is gone. So what was supposed to be a SLED function of investigating this crime scene was presumably done, a lot of it by Colleton County, in anticipation of this storm moving through. And so this gives the opportunity for Dick Harpootlian, that's his name, Harpootlian, Harpoot, P-O-O-T-L-I-A-N, Harpootlian. Dick Harpootlian is making a lot of hay about this. He's like, he's just, every chance he gets, and he's masterful at this, he's making it sound like Colleton County just walked all over that crime scene. It was so contaminated, this crime scene, by the time SLED got there. I mean, he'll ask a witness, so I was watching him this morning, did you measure from this point to this? She had all these measurements to a point of reference, which was in the feed shed. Did you measure from this point to this point? And she'd go, no. And he'd go, really? And he'd walk away. I'm thinking, and she'd look like, should I have? And then one time he says to her, what was the temperature outside that night? And she's like, I've got down here that it was 84 degrees. He goes, not 90? She's like, no, 84. And he's like, And then he walks away. So now she's going, like, was it 90? Was it 84? The jury, he's just really good, this guy. He really is. As much as I want to not like him, he's pretty good at what he does. And that's putting doubt in the mind, reasonable doubt in the mind of the jurors. That's all he got to do. All right, what else happens? Oh, then they do the first interview on the scene with Alec Murdaugh. Now, many of you may have seen it. It was all over YouTube. Him sitting in the vehicle, because the rain was coming. So they did at the scene already, because, I thought that Alex stayed on the line with the dispatcher. When I finished listening to that, as it turns out, he tells the dispatcher, I got to hang up. I need to call my family. Well, here's who he called. He called his brother, who's a lawyer, and he called the family lawyer, or his brother called the family lawyer. They come out to the scene, and they sit with him in the car during that interview. So you've got the female liaison. She's in the back seat. You've got in the front seat the sled guy, and then one of the attorneys. I don't know if it. I think it was his personal attorney, not his brother, sitting in this car. And the first thing they asked him was, describe what you saw when you came on the scene. And he's saying that, he first saw Paul's body, and he went over and he tried to roll him over, and he couldn't. And that when he did, Paul's cell phone came out of his pocket. So he picked it up, and then he quickly put it back down. Then he went over to check Maggie's. He went over to Maggie's body, and he was going to check her pulse, or he did check her pulse. I don't know. He touched her. He admits that he touched her. But as this lead investigator points out, he had these fresh clothes on. And fresh by meaning like they were just laundered kind of clothes. He was out there crying, sweating. It's hot, it's muggy, and he's sweating. And these clothes are like pristine. There's no sweat on these clothes. They're not wrinkled. There's no blood. There's no blood on his arms, his hands. And this is a very gruesome, bloody crime scene. I mean, we're hearing people talk about brains on the ceiling and, really gruesome, really gruesome. And just as an aside, the judge, before the testimony began, entered an order to seal all the photographs of the crime scene and the autopsy from the public. The only people seeing it are the court personnel and the jury. So no one is seeing it because it's that gruesome. But he doesn't have anything on him. Nothing. You tell me you touched both. You tried to roll your son over and you touched your wife, but there's no blood anywhere. What? Okay. What else happened? So I'm done with this page. Let's turn the page. So then he's asked about his relationship. How was your relationship with Paul? Oh, it's just as good as it can be. In fact, we spent the day together. He didn't go to work that day. Now, what he fails to tell anybody at the scene is that his partners had confronted him that week about all his financial crimes. They're like, hey, we know what you've been doing. And that he lost his bar license either very contemporaneously, right around that time, he's losing his license. So things are caving in on him. So he doesn't go to work that day. He spends his day driving around the property with Paul in his Suburban truck. So his relationship with Paul is as good as it can get. How about your relationship with Maggie? Oh, it was wonderful. Now, what he's not telling anybody is that they were separated. Not legally, but she was living she wasn't living at Moselle. She was living at the beach house. She came to Moselle for dinner because he invited her. He makes it sound, that whole interview, like she was there, they had dinner, like everybody lived there, like one big happy family. No, that's not how it went. She wasn't living there. And she calls somebody on her way over to dinner with Paul and Alex and says, what do you think he's up to now? We're gonna hear that later. Anyway, so things were not wonderful with Maggie. No. Anyway, so then during this interview brings up the boat crash because they're like, is there anyone that you think could have, has something to get, and he's always saying that people after the boat crash were all upset with Paul. and rightfully so. He killed Mallory Beach. She was very popular in this small town, you know, beautiful blonde girl, and you killed her. So you weren't getting along with everybody. And he said, you know, Paul would get punched and threatened, and then he talked about an employee that he had recently hired, that he was getting ready to let go because he destroyed their sunflower crop, and I don't know. He said, but I don't think it was him, and he was off today. He went to be with his mom or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, so he talked about that for a little while. So this investigator testified that there were no footprints or no knee prints around either of the bodies that he supposedly tried to roll over and tried to take pulse on. No knee prints, no footprints. And what else? Let's see. Okay. So that where it ends on Friday is they put the last witness they put on Friday is the crime scene technician. So through that, they are able to introduce a bunch of photos that, of course, nobody gets to see but the jury. And she talks about how they took the Suburban, Alec Murdaugh's vehicle, and they swabbed multiple places in the vehicle, steering wheel, you know, all that stuff, and it was positive for blood. Now, we don't know whose yet. We have to wait for the lab to come in and testify and tell us, you know, if it matched anybody's DNA. But she collected it, and then she did, she's the one that was doing all the measurements. She did this thing they call, oh gosh, what do they call it? There's a name for it, where they set up this camera and it does like a 3D. They do use it a lot in real estate. It does a 3D of the crime scene, you know, and it goes 360. And later on, when you're watching it, you can actually, you know, turn it to whatever you want to see at the scene, that kind of thing. So she set that up and she did that. So that was all direct evidence on Friday, and Harpootlian, the defense attorney, did not have a chance to cross-examine her. That started this morning. So that, and because he said on Friday he was going to be quite lengthy. So the judge said, okay, we're gonna go home for the weekend and you can resume on Monday. So that's where it left off. Oh, it's going to be an interesting week. So here are the questions that I still have. First of all, you know, what is the cell phone data and the GPS going to show us? We know that Maggie's cell phone was found a distance away. It wasn't found at the crime scenes. It was tossed out, presumably tossed out of a vehicle somewhere along a road. They found it by using Find My iPhone. That's how they found it. So someone took her cell phone, something she would not go anywhere without. So I'm assuming she had it with her at the kennels. So that means the murderer took this cell phone and discarded it somewhere. So is the GPS in the Suburban Alex Murdaugh, is that going to show us that he went, you know, down that road where the phone was dumped out? You know, I'm curious about these things. So also, who did it? Who tossed the phone out, you know? And then how did Maggie and Paul get to the kennels? Now, this is a kennel that you can see the house from the kennels. And when you're at the house, you can see the kennels. But it's still about 1,000 yards between the two. And most of the time, they would drive over there. Someone would drive them to the kennels. But this night, there's no vehicles except Alec Murdaugh's Suburban at the kennels. So how did they get there? Did they walk? It was very muggy and stormy that night and dark. Did they just walk to the kennels? I'm just curious. Did they? The other thing was, I don't know what the time frame for this was, like when this vehicle was found, but a white Ford F-250 that was typically driven by Paul was found abandoned broken down. Not at the crime scene, but at the side of a road just inside of Hampden County, next county over. Now, I don't know what the timing is on that or if it has anything to do with this crime, but I'm curious. Does it? Then what's the significance of all this water? Was it because Paul was washing down the, what? It wasn't from rain because it was like only in one area, And then the tire tracks. What's the significance of these tire tracks and footprints? There were footprints found near Maggie's body. Are they Maggie's footprints? Are they somebody else's footprints? You can do a lot with footprint evidence. A lot. So the question becomes, who else could have done this if it wasn't Alex? And could it have been more than one person? The defense is sure hammering that home. They want the jury to think, hey, this was more than one person. And I thought about that today because here's what I want to hear about is the trajectory of the bullets, because Alex Murdaugh is really tall. He's tall. Now, Paul was not tall. His brother, Buster, is tall, but Paul was not tall like his dad. So was it a downward trajectory with the rifle, upward, down? What was it? I'm curious. Like, what was the angle these people were shot at? And what were the distances? Now, the prosecution has told us extremely close. Was it extremely close? I want to know. What does the ballistics show? Anyway, we all want to know. Okay, let's talk about the true crime calendar. We're going to talk about Miranda rights today. You all know what those are. We had to study these in law school. But I'm going to tell you about them in one page. Yep, Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Do you understand the rights as I have just read them to you? With these rights in mind, do you wish to speak to me? So we know those are the Miranda rights. The above warning is a list of suspects' Miranda rights protected under the 5th and 6th Amendments, namely the right against self-incrimination and the right to speak with an attorney before being questioned by the police. The language is derived from the landmark 1966 Supreme Court case Miranda versus Arizona. The case determined that any statements spoken or written that a suspect makes during an interrogation are inadmissible in court unless the suspect is aware of their rights before questioning. Authorities must confirm that the suspect understands their rights and has voluntarily waived them. They do so by reading the suspect their rights, also known as Mirandizing. Did they read him his rights, Alex, before he got into that car for that interview? I'm sure they must have, but I don't remember that part. This is always the interesting part of a case, whether the suspect has been read their rights or not. Yeah, very interesting. Okay. That's the show for today, guys. I'm going to sit here and diamond paint for the rest of the day because I have done all my chores. I've gone everywhere I need to go. And I could stay home instead of going out and freezing my little buns off. Don't forget to hit the like button. He enjoys the abuse. But he's my favorite person. It's that little symbol, just looks like that. It does help the algorithm. I want people to know who I am. Hit the like button so they can hear all about crafting and crime. Share this video with someone you think might enjoy listening to this kind of thing while they craft. And if you enjoyed it, leave me a comment. Consider subscribing, and don't forget the notification bell because you don't want to miss a single episode. Make sure you hit all, and then you won't miss an episode. I do put out an episode Monday through Friday. Yep. All right, guys. Have a great Monday, and I will see you tomorrow in Crafting and Crime Daily. Bye.